You know, there's a reason why Bulgaria does not typically show up on the lists of top 10 places that Americans want to retire to, or top best countries for Americans to move to, etc., etc. And the reason is it can be hard to get here and to live here. Bulgaria presents some unique challenges that you might not find in other countries. And because on this channel I like to present everything, the good and the bad, and the stuff in between, I want to make a video talking about the 12 things that we've discovered have been difficult for us upon moving to Bulgaria. Now, one quick caveat before I get started. If things are hard, then of necessity, I'm talking about things that are difficult for us. And the reason that I'm saying that obvious statement is while 99% of the comments I get on my YouTube channel are extremely supportive and helpful and really informative. I learned so much from comments that people put on my videos. There's always that very teeny tiny 1% who says, why are you complaining about such and such? Go back to the United States. Okay, well, no, no, we're pretty happy here. So I don't see us going back to the United States anytime soon, but gee, thanks for the warm welcome. Regardless, things that are hard, I don't mean to come across as complaints. I'm just trying to present a balanced picture, okay? Hi, my name is Maureen. In 2024, I moved to Bulgaria with my husband, Jeremy, and our 2 tuxedo cats, Damon and Pythias, and I make videos for expats and wannabe expats so that you can make informed decisions. Number 1, getting residency here is not easy. I sometimes wonder if the Bulgarian government doesn't want us here, and that's why they make it so challenging to become a resident here. As I've mentioned in other videos, and I will link those up top so you can look at the process in detail, the process to move here is a 2-step process. It starts in your home country where you apply for a D visa, and that involves a lot of hoop jumping. And then that visa is good for 6 months. And then you come to Bulgaria and you have to reapply for your residency here. The good news is that the requirements for the residency are pretty similar to the requirements for the D visa. And I've talked about those requirements before, but you have to get an apostilled clean FBI criminal record. You have to have proof that you can support yourselves. You have to have proof of savings. You have to open a Bulgarian bank account. You have to have health insurance for a year. You have to have a residence secured for a year. And those things are extremely difficult to do if you're not already living in the country. But you're not going to be living in the country because you have to apply for the D visa from your home country. We did hire an immigration attorney, and quite honestly, I'm not sure how we would have managed without his help. And he actually did several things for us directly because we gave him power of attorney. There's a bunch of catch-22s that are involved in meeting some of these requirements. Number 1, it's very difficult for foreigners to open a bank account here. They just don't want to do it. I think it has to do with the potential for money laundering. I'm not sure, but it's very, very difficult for Americans to open a bank account in Bulgaria. We gave our attorney power of attorney, and I don't even know what he did to open these bank accounts. He just took care of it for us. Likewise, the residency. Picture this. You either need a property deed, meaning you've purchased a property here, or you need a 1-year lease indicating that you've rented a property here for 12 months. But you're not here yet. You're in the United States. So that is such a catch-22. I don't know how most people do it. We had our attorney handle it for us. He managed to find us a lease and took care of the legalities of that before we came over here. In addition, the FBI report is time-consuming to obtain. Not the FBI side. That, for us, went very quickly. But after the FBI issues your criminal report, you need to get that apostilled by the State Department. And that was what was very time-consuming. In addition, you need that report polled a second time for your residency because they don't allow you to use a report that's older than 6 months. And in all likelihood, because of the way the timing works, your initial FBI report that you used for your D visa will expire before you have to use it again for your residency in Bulgaria. And then you have to get a second FBI report, and you're already in Bulgaria. You're never in the right place where you need the things, because that comes back to you from the United States. So that was a cumbersome process. I made a whole video of how we got around that. But suffice it to say, it is neither easy nor inexpensive to get your residency here. I have another video that I made on what it cost us to move here, and I'll put a link to that up above as well. So Jeremy and I used to joke, boy, you really want to have to live here to make this happen, because there is a lot of hoop jumping requirements to meet, as well as expense to getting your residency here in Bulgaria. Number 2, the bureaucracy here is overwhelming. It doesn't seem to matter what process you're going through. It's more than just immigration. The whole bureaucratic red tape thing in Bulgaria is just cumbersome. The best example I can give you on this is what we had to do to get our residency. Now, I'm not talking about all the requirements we had to meet. I just talked about those. But let's talk about the actual process to get your residency card. We had to go to immigration 4 times. And on top of that, we were not told that it would take 4 visits until our first visit. But that was where our attorney dropped the ball. That's not a reflection on the Bulgarian immigration system. But it is very slow, and it is very precise, and it is not very efficient. And you have to go back. Technically, you have to go back 3 times, but that is only if everything is perfect on the first visit. So we went in for our first visit and submitted all those documents that I just talked about. We did bring our attorney with us, who was bilingual, and the clerks in the immigration office are generally very helpful. They are the first kind of line of defense. They're reviewing all these documents. So they're the ones that can look at it and give you a very quick snapshot of if you have everything correct or not. One of the things we had to provide that I didn't even mention in number 1, in addition to your notarized lease, is that you have to have your landlord fill out a certification that they do indeed own the property that you're staying in. And they have to have the deed number, and it has to be worded a certain way. We had that document, but we did not have it on the letterhead or the form that our particular immigration office wanted it to be on. So she gave that back to us and told us what we had to do. She gave us the correct copy of the form, and we had to then go ask our landlord to re-notarize another copy. So that was the first visit. We had to wait. I think we arrived about 10:30 in the morning. I don't think we got in front of an immigration agent until 2:30 in the afternoon. So that was just a game of hurry up and wait. We then got the correct form. We got our landlord to go and get it notarized. We got that taken care of. And then Jeremy went back the next day and dropped that off. And I don't think he had to wait as long on that one. I think maybe he had to wait an hour because he was just dropping off a form. So that was visit number 2. A week or 2 weeks later, we had to go back, and that is when they take your biometrics. So they gave us another application to fill out that asked all kinds of really in-depth questions, like the social security numbers of our deceased parents and our siblings. We put down their names and dates of birth, but we did not know their social security numbers, nor did I think they would be really thrilled with me for having those numbers publicized. So we just left that blank, and it wasn't a problem. So we had to fill out that extra form with some really kind of bizarre, minute information. And then they took our biometrics. So they took our fingerprints, they took our photos. Then we had to go back a week later to actually pick up the card. That was the shortest visit. I think we had to wait maybe an hour and a half to get in. And then once we got in there, it was like bing, bang, boom. And we didn't bring a translator for that last meeting because we didn't need it. It was just a quick little in and out to pick up the actual cards. And everything is like that. I heard the other day, someone was telling me, somebody who knew what they were talking about, said that to close out a bank account in this country, you have to go to the bank twice. Now, they were talking about one particular bank. It happens to be our bank. But to close out an account, you can't just go in and go up to the teller like we do in the US and say, I want to close my account. And you fill out a form and they check your ID and you walk out with your money and your account is closed. No, no, no. You go into the bank, you request that they close the account. They do their magic on that. And then you have to go back in another couple of weeks to actually get your funds. And the person that was asking about this was no longer in Bulgaria and was trying to figure out a way to close out their bank account without having to come back to Bulgaria and wait that duration between appointment 1 and appointment 2. And from the advice that that person was being given, I just don't think that's possible. Driver's licenses are the same thing. I'm going to talk about that here in the next minute. Bottom line is, across the board, do not expect efficiency in the bureaucratic system in Bulgaria. It just doesn't exist. Number 3, getting a driver's license here, if you're not a citizen or a resident of another EU country, is extremely time consuming. I've been doing a lot of research on this because currently we can drive legally here on our Colorado license as long as we have an international driver's permit to accompany it, and we do. We can do that for the first year of our residency. We obtained our residency last July, so we're good until the end of June 2026. But I was starting to get wind of the fact that getting a driver's license here is difficult. If you're in another European country, you just go in and trade it in. I think it's nothing. But America, no such luck. My understanding from the research I've done, and I had a viewer actually reach out to me who was extremely helpful, who knows somebody in the Bulgarian driver's license office, the Bulgarian equivalent of what we in America call the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles. And he very graciously got some information for me. And what I found out is that it's even more cumbersome than I thought it was going to be. My understanding is the reason they make it so cumbersome, particularly for Americans, is they assume that most Americans do not know how to drive a manual transmission, because most of our cars in the US are automatic transmission and most of the cars in Bulgaria are manual transmission. And if you've never driven a manual transmission and you show up to take your driver's test and you think you know what you're doing and they come out with a manual transmission car, you're not going to know how to drive it. They make you jump through a lot of hoops, take on the road classes, take in classroom classes. And a lot of that is because they assume that Americans don't know how to drive a stick. Well, I got to tell you, in my circle of people, I only know one person who doesn't know how to drive a manual transmission, and he's perfectly trainable. He's just never been presented the opportunity. I can drive a manual. Jeremy, my kids, my grandkids, our friends can all drive stick shifts. So I don't know if we're unique. If you're American and you're watching this, can you put a comment down below that says if you know how to drive a stick or not? Because I think the Bulgarians are misinformed when they think we don't know how to drive sticks. Most people my age know how to drive a manual transmission. So I'm just a little curious about that. But be that as it may, I'm sure that's not the only reason. But you have to, let me think now, I don't even know how many hours is involved, but you have to take on the road classes, like driver training, like that stuff you took when you were 16. You have to take classroom training for a certain number of hours. You have to get a health certificate from a Bulgarian doctor indicating that you are fit to drive health-wise. And you have to take a Red Cross CPR first aid class so that you are certified in that. And those are only taught here in Bulgarian, although my understanding is that the handouts can be in English and then you can take the test in English. And then what's the last thing? Oh, you have to get, I love this one, you have to get a copy of your high school diploma and have it translated into Bulgarian and apostilled. In lieu of a high school diploma, I believe you can get your university degree, also has to be apostilled. I don't know why they think only people with a high school diploma can drive. I don't see the correlation between those two things, but that is their regulation. I mean, I'm 67 years old. My 50th high school reunion is in 2026. I don't know that they've kept records from that far back. That may be something I need to look into here in the next 6 to 8 months because I might be needing it to get my driver's license. So if driving in your new country is important to you, that's something to think about. It can be done. It takes time and it takes money. There are driving schools here that will teach you how to do it. They will help you with the paperwork. They will give you all kinds of tips on how to deal with the Bulgarian testers. There are schools here and instructors who will help you do that, but they charge for their services. It's not inexpensive. There's one guy in Sofia who is really well known in the expat circle for helping foreigners get their license in Bulgaria. And he has a complete web page with all the requirements on there. I'm going to put a link to that in a pinned comment below, because that is by far the best resource I have found, so that you can come into this with your eyes wide open. Just bear in mind, if you want to drive here, your current US state driver's license is only going to be good for the first 12 months of your residency. And after that, you have to get a Bulgarian driver's license. And I don't see any other way around that. If somebody has one, put it in the comments, because that would be invaluable. But I don't think so. I've checked around. I just don't think there's any other way around this whole process. But if you know of one, let us know. Number 4, when you are in Bulgaria and you're American, you are really far away from family and friends. There's a whole ocean in between you. This can make adjusting to life here challenging. And a lot of people, especially those of us who are grandparents, end up throwing in the towel on Bulgaria because it's just too far away. On top of that, there's just not that many Americans here. So if you think that you're going to come here and find your kindred spirit American tribe, that might be more of a challenge than you expect it to be. I think most Americans that live in Bulgaria are probably living in Sofia, and then there's a smattering of us in other cities throughout the country. I would imagine Varna has some. Plovdiv, it's a very small number of Americans. Bansko has a sprinkling of Americans. Americans do not make up a high percentage of the immigrants in Bulgaria. Now, there is definitely a large number of immigrants here who speak English, and a large number of Bulgarians do speak English. So you certainly will have people to mingle with. There are a fair number of British and Irish immigrants in Bansko, and we only need a little bit of translation to talk with them. For the most part, we understand what they're saying. But the bottom line is, do not come to Bulgaria thinking you're going to find a niche of like-minded Americans. You can find English speakers and you can forge some really solid friendships and connections here, but they probably won't be Americans that you're doing that with. Number 5, the Bulgarian language is really hard to learn. Bulgarian uses the Cyrillic alphabet, so it's totally foreign to what we're used to seeing. The good news is that once you master the sounds of the Cyrillic alphabet, they're the same across the board. It's not like in English where we have short vowels and long vowels, and different letters can have different pronunciations depending on their positioning in a word. It's not like that. In Cyrillic, a character makes, for the most part, one sound, and that is the sound that you just keep repeating. So that's the good news. But it's not like learning Spanish. When we moved to Ecuador, we got pretty decent with our Spanish, and we thought that was hard at the time. But it is no comparison to trying to learn Bulgarian. I do not envision myself ever becoming fluent in Bulgarian. I practice every day. I take some online classes, and I can get by with the niceties of hello, good morning, how much does this cost? Excuse me, thank you, and a few key phrases that I need when I go to the market. And I do plan on always improving and getting more proficient, but I have pretty much given up on the fact that I'm going to be fluent in this language. So it is a challenge, and it's more of a challenge depending on where you decide to live in Bulgaria. If you want to go out to one of the villages for a more peaceful rural experience than city life, you're going to find far fewer English speakers there than you're going to find in the bigger cities. So that's something to bear in mind. Unless you have a real affinity for learning languages, Bulgarian can be challenging to learn. Number 6, jobs here do not pay well. So your best bet if you are coming over from the United States is to bring your US income with you. For Jeremy and me, that's our Social Security income. We also run a business in the United States that generates US type wages. So whether your income is from a pension, investments, if you're a remote worker, you need to structure your life here so that you are receiving US wages while you're paying Bulgarian expenses. So if you want to move to Bulgaria primarily for a lower cost of living and you trade in your US wages for Bulgarian ones, you're just trading one financial set of problems for another. So I would not advise coming to Bulgaria unless you have some sort of an outside of Bulgaria income stream that you can count on. Get that squared away before you come over here, because you're not going to find a ton of high paying Bulgarian jobs that will support you with an income that you would have expected in the United States. Number 7, it's expensive to get here. So even, let's just talk bare bones, which Jeremy and I did not do bare bones, but let me talk about the minimum amount of money you're going to have to lay out to get here. And I do have a video that I made that talked about what it cost us to come here, and I'll link that above so you can get a sense of what our actual costs were. But at the very bare minimum, you're going to have to get here. So you have that airfare, and you are going to have to pay for your whatever the fees are to get the visa, not only the D visa and the residency visa. And there are other expenses involved in that that you might not think of right off the bat. For example, for the D visa, you have to apply for that in person at a Bulgarian consulate in the United States. It has to be the one that serves the state in which you live. And there's only a handful of those throughout the United States. So for the most part, people don't live down the street from the consulate. You have to travel there. So we had to fly from Denver to Chicago and submit our application. And those are expenses that you have to factor in depending on how close you are to the consulate or the embassy. So in addition to the visa fees and the getting here fees, you're going to have to pay a year of healthcare premiums up front, and you're going to have to put money into a Bulgarian bank account. And I've talked about that too. And I'm not going to mention that amount here because it changes all the time. But there is a fair amount of funds that you're going to have to put into a Bulgarian bank account. And granted, that's not an expense. It's still your money, but it's tied up. I mean, we just put our money into our Bulgarian bank account and we just left it there because we know when we go back to renew our residency next summer, we need to show that money is still there. So can you take it out and then put it back? Sure, it's your money. But we just look at that money as not spendable money. We just let it sit there. So you have to factor that in when you think about coming over here. And those are just the bare bones things. Other things that you're more than likely going to have to pay for: legal fees for your immigration attorney. I just don't know how you would meet some of these requirements if you didn't have a guy on the inside to help you with that kind of stuff. I can't imagine doing this process as an American moving to Bulgaria, because it's very, very difficult if you don't have somebody on the inside to handle some of these things for you. And the visa attorney fees, I think, are fairly hefty. I don't have other countries' fees to compare them to. I do know that what we paid in Bulgaria was about double what we paid our visa agent in Ecuador. So you can maybe use that as a guide. You're just going to need basic necessities when you get here. Even if you rent a furnished apartment, there are some things you're going to want to buy for your household, for yourself, to get yourself established. And those setup costs can get pricey. You'll probably need a security deposit on an apartment that you're going to have to come up with. You might want to do an exploratory trip. That's another expense that you're going to have to factor in. Potential shipping costs for any items that you want to take with you. Unless you're one of those folks that's going to show up with just, a backpack or, your 2 check-in bags, and that's going to be enough for you. And that may be. Some people can travel light like that. I have not figured out how to do that yet. Probably never will. I think that ship has sailed. But if there are extra suitcases you want to bring or you want to ship things over, bear in mind that those are going to incur more expenses. So the bottom line is, it is not inexpensive to move here. Number 8, the healthcare system here is probably not like what you've grown accustomed to in the US. I cannot speak to the healthcare system directly. I get lots of questions. Can I do a video about the healthcare system? The only way I can do that is if I bring in a guest presenter, because Jeremy and I have yet to experience the healthcare system here. We haven't needed it. I do know this much. The healthcare system in Bulgaria, like many countries, is 2-tiered. There's a public system and a private system. The public system, my understanding is it's fairly rudimentary. If you go into the hospital, for example, and it's a public hospital, you should not expect all of the perks that would come to us if we were in a hospital in the United States. A lot of them don't supply toilet paper or toiletries. I'm not even sure if you get meals in the hospital here. My understanding is if you go into a public hospital here, you need to bring a caregiver with you. You need somebody who can help you to the bathroom and bring you things that the hospital does not supply and run errands and those types of things. Because I really don't think that the public system here is at all like the US, where every time you want the nurse, you click the buzzer and they come running. Okay. I don't think it's like that. Then there's the private system, which is what most expats would utilize and what our insurance covers is the private system. I have not participated in that either. My understanding is that some hospitals are better than others. Sofia is supposed to have a couple of great hospitals there, and that the level and standard of care in a private hospital or with a private facility is going to be superior to that of the public facility. But that is all I can comment on. I always get lots of comments from people about the healthcare, both good and bad. So if you have a more in-depth experience than we have had, please do comment below, because that's really important to some people. Now, bear in mind, if you come to Bulgaria from the US and you already have an ongoing medical issue, you're going to want to research that extensively before you come here. You want to make sure that there are doctors here that can treat you, that they have the medications that you're looking for. We did not come here with really any serious pre-existing conditions. The one thing I can tell you is that a lot of medications that are prescription in the US are not prescription here, and it makes it much easier to obtain. I take levothyroxine, which is for thyroid, and I can get that here without a prescription. It's extremely inexpensive. So see what I mean about the alphabet? Not easy. But anyway, this box of 100 tablets, which lasts me 100 days, was, where's the price? A little less than €3. So very affordable here, and I don't need a prescription to get it. The only other thing I can tell you medication-wise, I take supplemental hormones for hormone replacement therapy, and I just get a year's worth of those whenever I'm in the United States. So I get them over there. My doctor prescribes them there, and I bring them over here. I go back to the US at least once a year. So I don't know. I've done some research. I think you can get it here, but I don't think it's quite as easy to get as it is in the United States. So that's all I have to say on the healthcare system. Do your homework and make sure you're aware of what sort of system you're going to be walking into, because it's going to be, I think, quite different than it is in the US. Number 9, speaking of healthcare, Bulgaria is a smoking culture. Europeans in general smoke more than Americans, and Bulgarians are at the top of the list, and they tend to be a little lackadaisical in enforcing their no smoking rules and regulations. So don't expect that it's going to be a smoke-free environment if that is what you're used to in the United States. The areas where we have not had an issue with secondhand smoke have been taxis, have always been fine. The metro in Sofia does not allow smoking, and they enforce it. Rental cars, you have to be a little careful with that. The first rental car that we rented, Jeremy opened the door and popped his head in, and it had a cigarette smell to it. That was the only time we ever had a problem. We didn't take that car, we took another one. So we've never had a problem. And we've never had a rental car since then that has smelled like smokes. So I think I can safely say that you're pretty good with rental cars, not having to worry that they smell like cigarette smoke. Any office that you go into, meeting with an accountant or an attorney, never had an issue with cigarette smoking. Immigration office does not allow cigarette smoking. On most buses, it's not a problem. Occasionally in Plovdiv, you will have a driver who is smoking and he's kind of holding his hand out the window. I just go to the back of the bus. It's just not that big of a deal, but that will happen occasionally. I don't think they're supposed to, but like I said, they're sometimes a little lackadaisical about enforcing the rules. It's not so bothersome to us that we can't step to the back of the bus and just get away from it. And the other place we've never had a problem with smoking is the supermarket, the malls, even small shops. I have never gone into our local produce stand down the street and encountered somebody smoking. They might be out on the sidewalk smoking, but they're not inside and smoke. The 2 places where we've encountered an issue with cigarette smoking would be restaurants and the bus stops. So anytime you're outside, it's fair game. So the other day we were waiting for a bus and I sat down on the bench at the bus stop which is partially enclosed by a plexiglass wall. And a lady sat next to me and she had a cigarette and I had to get up and walk away. Anytime you're near a group of people outside, you can bet that probably some or all of them will be smoking. So that's something I tend to steer clear of. And then restaurants are kind of a gray area. I think legally you're not allowed to smoke in restaurants. That is enforced very erratically across the country. And Jeremy and I don't eat out a lot. So it's a little bit difficult for me to comment on that. I think typically speaking, they save the out of doors for smokers and the indoors for non-smokers. But we went into a restaurant once in Veliko Tarnovo when we were first here last December. So it was too cold to eat outside. And they asked us if we wanted smoking or non, which I had not been asked in 20 years in the United States. And we picked non-smoking, but you could still smell the smoke coming over. I mean, the meal was, and plus the food wasn't good. The whole experience was not a positive one for us. You could definitely still smell the smoke in the non-smoking section. It basically had a half wall. Well, where do you think the cigarette smoke goes? It goes over the top of the wall. So that did not work for us. We sometimes choose to sit outside in the summertime because it's nice out. We want to sit outside. We understand that if we do that, even if we start off the meal and there's no smokers around us, that smokers can come and sit by us. And so we've had to juggle that a couple of times. So you should bear in mind that you're going to have to adjust to the smoking culture if you come from the United States to Bulgaria to live. Okay, number 10. Don't expect things in Bulgaria to be done with the same efficiency as they are in the US. And this kind of goes back to the bureaucracy, but it's deeper than that. I have found since we have moved here that I don't expect websites to work. A lot of times you click on links in websites and they just go nowhere. A lot of things here are not automated electronically, or they're simply not functioning. For example, many times I have looked up a place on Google Maps and I get very explicit directions, as Google tends to do. And I follow those directions and I walk to what I think is the place. And I get there and it's either an empty storefront or it's a totally different business, or that the business I was going to look for is just not there. So just because Google Maps says it exists doesn't mean that it does. In general, don't expect anything you need to do to take only one visit. I always assume 3. And then if it's less than that, I'm pleasantly surprised. It's just that the American culture is based on speed and convenience and efficiency. And we get very used to that as Americans. Things are going to take more time here. Things are going to move a little bit slower. They will be less automated. And you may have to go back more times than you think is necessary to get something done. I'm harkening back now to my immigration story. Here's my advice. Expect it to take longer than you think it should, and then you won't have to get upset. And it just makes for a less stressful experience if you expect that it's going to be not as efficient as the culture that you came from. Number 11, customer service overall is not going to be as thorough or as effusive as it is in the United States. Now, disclaimer here, this is more of something I'm telling you because I've heard other people talk about it. I can talk about a couple of experiences we've had of poor customer service, but by and large, I don't know if we're just lucky or what, but we have been treated extremely well by everybody in the service sector here, anybody who has done a job for us or where I have gone to purchase something. I have always found them to be extremely helpful. Now, are they as effusive as we are in the US? No, that part is certainly true. Most of the stories that I have heard about poor customer service have come to me from other people. I can't really speak to it, but overall, it seems like it's so well known that customer service here isn't great. We actually read about it before we came here. We were a little concerned about it because we own a business, and when you own your own business, and it's based in the United States, and you're used to giving United States level of customer service, it's really hard to not get that in return when you are the customer. So we talked about that extensively before we came over here, and we came prepared to be ill-treated in the customer service department, and we have really not found that very much at all. Now, I can tell you a couple of stories. I had a taxi driver yell at me once because I allegedly slammed the door. I don't think I slammed it. I may have shut it a little harder than I normally do, but he was very upset with me that I shut the door too hard. So that was one time I just kind of blew it off and said, okay, this guy's having a bad day. In another instance, we went out to eat and I went to pay the bill, and the waitress asked me if I wanted to pay in cash or card. And I said cash. And I think the bill was maybe 30 leva. And the smallest bill I had was a 50. So I took that out, which, I mean, a 50, 30 from 50 is 20. It's like 10 euros change that I needed. It's not like it was a big amount of money. And so I gave her the 50, and she kind of rolled her eyes and let me know that she couldn't break the 50. And since that's all I had, and Jeremy didn't have anything smaller, I then indicated that I had to switch my form of payment from cash to card. She was not happy with me because I told her cash in the first place, but it wasn't my fault. She couldn't break the bill. So she was a little perturbed. We managed to get that all smoothed out after a few minutes, but I think she was unjustifiably perturbed with me because she couldn't break the 50 lev note that I had. Our most frustrating lack of customer service that stands out in my mind is I wanted to get a blackout curtain made for our guest room. So I shopped around, I looked on Google Maps, I found the curtain place. We went to the curtain place. It was actually where Google Maps said it was going to be. They didn't speak English, but we used Google Translate. We were in there probably 45 minutes. I picked out the fabric I wanted, and then I came back home and I took the measurements of the window and I texted them back to her, and she told us to come back, I think it was in 2 weeks. She also said she would text me when the curtain was ready. She didn't text me. She did not respond to our text. So I went back and was told it wasn't ready to come back in a week. Okay, fine. Came back in a week. Now, mind you, every time we go to this place, we have to take a bus and we have to walk a little ways because we don't have a car. And we're not fluent in Bulgarian, so I just can't pick up the phone and call these folks and say, hey, is my curtain ready? It's a little bit of an ordeal to get to some of these places. So we went back after a week. I think I sent Jeremy in, and there was a sign on the door that said the shop was closed due to illness and they would be back, whenever. And we proceeded to go back every week for 3 or 4 weeks. This whole process took about 7 or 8 weeks, I think. And then finally, I texted and said, hey, this is just crazy. I need the curtain, or I need my deposit back. We had paid a 50% deposit. And then she did respond and said, oh, I'm so sorry, but that fabric that you ordered is not even available. This was 7 weeks after I ordered it, and she hadn't even started the curtain. I was under the impression that she had been working on it and had hit a family illness or whatever that had to be dealt with, which is understandable, but that's not the case at all. She never even ordered the fabric because supposedly it was no longer available. And then I had to go back again to get the refund in cash because that's how we paid it. And I think we had to go back twice for that as well. So that was a clear-cut example of really awful customer service. After all that time, I walked away. I did get my money back, but I didn't get the curtain. That was customer service I'd care not to repeat. But for us, they have been few and far between. But I do know that many people have nightmare tales of customer service here. So just come over and don't expect that. I mean, you don't have to be treated badly, and you can certainly always walk away. But in general, don't expect a lot of effusiveness. I went into a pharmacy once, and I know that there's a pharmacist who works there who speaks English, and he wasn't there that day. There was another pharmacist there who didn't speak English. So using Google Translate, I asked the other pharmacist if the English-speaking man would be back the next day. And he just said yes. So he answered my question. He wasn't rude. That's not how it would work in the US. In the US, we would say, oh, I'm so sorry that the person you don't want is not here today, but come back at 10 a.m. tomorrow and I'll make sure he knows you're coming. A lot of wasted words as far as the Bulgarians are concerned. Just expect short answers to the questions that you have, and you'll get the information that you need without a lot of fluff. And then the last thing that makes it a little bit challenging to live here is you should not expect the infrastructure of Bulgaria to be similar to that of what we have in the United States. The United States invests a lot of money into their roads and their bridges and those types of infrastructural things. But you could be walking down the street in Bulgaria and the sidewalk will just end and there's traffic all over the place and you have to navigate how to get around that. Or there might be holes in the sidewalk, that tiles or whatever, cobblestones, stones that have popped up. You need to pay attention to where you're walking and where you're driving, because the roads here are probably not going to be in a condition that you expect them to be. You can get from point A to point B, you just have to be a little bit more attentive and alert. And likewise, other infrastructural things. We have had power outages in Bulgaria far more than we ever had in the United States, but not as many as we had in Ecuador. Those were constant. So we've had a handful of power outages since we've moved here, nothing that lasted hours on end, but a lot of the structural foundational elements are not as robust in Bulgaria as they are in the United States. So there's my 12 reasons as to why moving to Bulgaria may not be a walk in the park. The more you anticipate these things and expect them to happen, the less stressed you're going to be when they do, and the better able you're going to be to navigate that particular Bulgarian system. I mean, between bureaucracy, missing family, and the occasional pothole in the street, life here can test your patience in more ways than one. But here's the thing, every country has its challenges. Bulgaria just asks that you earn your expat badge with a little more paperwork and a little more persistence. But if you can hang in through the paperwork and some of the other downsides that I've talked about, you're going to be rewarded with wonderful people, a welcoming environment, a low cost of living, and natural beauty that is just unbelievably gorgeous. And the slow pace of life here, that alone makes up for some of their bureaucracy and some of the other things that we've had to adjust to. If you want more information on how to obtain the D visa and residency, I'll put links to those videos in a comment so you can get to those easily. They will walk you step by step through the process. This is not meant to take the place of an immigration attorney, but you can at least get a feel for what our process was when we obtained both our D visa and our residency. And if you're thinking, hey, this sounds hard but doable, then stick around, subscribe, like. There'll be more information coming if you're an American thinking about moving to Bulgaria. I try to be as helpful as I can because there's not a lot of us here. So I want to give out information that is particular to Americans coming over here, because it's more challenging for us than it is for EU and European citizens to come to Bulgaria. So please do hit like and subscribe. Hit that little bell so you get notified when a new video gets posted. I try to post at least once a week. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.